Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon and good morning, all the viewers in Korea and all over the world. Welcome to the expert discussion, the changes in maritime as a result of GHG and Future Fuel of 2021 Korea Maritime Week. First of all, I have to say thanks to Korea Ministry of Ocean and Fisheries and the Secretariat for inviting me to this important event and giving me a chance to share this expert discussion with a renowned expert. It's my great honor. Let me introduce myself first. I'm Sung-hwan Lim, Senior Vice President and General Manager of Korean Research in charge of technical business support. My career background is a naval architect. I started my career as a design engineer in one of Korean shipyard before joining KR. During my 20 years in KR, I mainly work in drawing approval, site survey, and IAX work. At this moment, my main mission is to assist the shipping industry, especially their response to GHG regulation. And we have three more renowned experts as a panelist. Dr. Javi Bazari, he's a Managing Director of Energy and Emission Solution, and he presented the second presentation today. Professor Hee-jin Kang, he's a Senior Director of Korea Research Institute of Ship and Ocean Engineering. He presented the second presentation today. And Dr. Edmund Hughes, he's a Director of General Marine Associate, and he has a long experience in IMO, and he is our special panelist. So I think it's I want to start panel discussion with a short summary of our own presentation. I'll start myself. My presentation mainly focused on the short-term measures of initial IMO GHG strategy, especially EEXI and CII. I show you the impact and the implication of them. The influence of EEXI on CII rating was also explained. The important point I want to emphasize that EEXI is a one-time measure. It's like a school entrance exam, but CII rating needs to be checked every year with the stronger criteria every year. It's like a midterm or final exam you have to take every year. The criteria itself will become stronger every year. CII have a long-lasting, bigger influence on ship operation. I also show you the reduction factor of CII after 2027, which will be decided later in IMO. CII reduction factor might become severe after 2026. In addition, final sector and charters put more and more pressure on shipping industry toward shipping decarbonization with the various initiatives such as Poseidon Principle and Chicago charters. At the last of my presentation, I try to show what ship owners or operators have to do right now and coming years. We have to check the current energy efficiency status of our own fleet. Based on this current check, ship owners have to set up their own decarbonization strategy. Impact of EEXI and CII are different based on the condition of your own fleet, such as ship type, ship size, ship's age, navigation route, and others. Even though there are lots of information about the impact of EEXI and CII nowadays, you have to check the impact on your own fleet. It could be quite different from the general impact. This current check of energy efficiency of your own fleet could be sound base for future fuel change plan or new building plan. You can see more details and longer version of my presentation, video clip on our YouTube channel of Korean Register. If you need more information or support, you can contact with the email address decarbonization@krs.co.kr. This is a short summary of my presentation. I think, Dr. Bazari, can I ask you to summarize your presentation with the introduction of yourself first? Dr. Bazari?
Thank you very much, Mr. Lim, and I would like also to thank the organizer of this conference and also the Republic of Korea for inviting me to be part of this 2020 Maritime Week of Korea. Yes, I am Javi Bazari. My background is mainly on the marine engineering side with long-standing experience Like yourself in classification societies, I have been with Lloyd's Register for a very long time. After that, I established my own consultancy firm in London, UK. And I have been quite busy with the issue of greenhouse gas emissions and Marcolianic 6. And that is an area that I'm still active. I'm fully supporting the activities, some of the activities that IMO is doing in that area. As far as my presentation is concerned, I focused in my presentation on fuels and fuel transition or energy transition in shipping. And I started my argument with references to IMO GHG strategy that we know has mandated 50% reduction in total GHG emission from shipping by 2050 relative to 2008. And that line of argument continued that how are we going to achieve those 50%? And we talked about technology a little bit, we talked about operations side, but most importantly, I highlighted in my presentation that most of these reductions should come because of changing fuels. So changing fuel is quite pivotal in achieving what IMO has mandated under its GHG strategy. Now, if the change in fuel is so important, where are we going to go and how we are going to go about it? So within the presentation, I highlighted where are the primary source of energy and what type of final energy would be used by ships and how this transition would be taking place. Of course, we have got two sources, which I highlighted there, fossil fuels at the present time and renewable energy, one way or the other in the future. Whether there would be a liquid fuel pathway or a gas fuel pathway, or there would be transition to partial electric, those was discussed as well as was part of my presentation. Because electricity is playing such an important role in future transition, I highlighted the alternative fuels, which is coming to be produced from electricity. So we talked about electrofuels and so on. Within my presentation, I thought it is very important to highlight for the industry that all these changes which is going to happen would change the shape of the shipping, would require a lot of money, and therefore there was references to how to raise finance. And finally, I mentioned that international cooperation is absolutely important in decarbonization, and therefore we need to be careful at that side. So that was more or less what I mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bajari. Your summary is also very wonderful. And Dr. Gang, can I ask you to introduce yourself and summarize your presentation? Dr. Gang?
Hello, everyone. It's very nice time to meet you all via this webinar. My name is Hisin Kang, working for CRISO in Korea. Especially, I'm working for ocean carbon neutral related technology development. In my presentation, the only way to reduce the total amount of GHG emitted from the ships by more than 50% is to change the fuel and the propulsion system itself. So we have to develop some technology about green ship and green shipping related technology, but in most cases, marine demonstration procedure and how to make track record is quite difficult and urgent issue for many of enterprises and for institutions. So in this material, I suggest some new concept of marine demonstration ships, so-called GHG. CRISO and Korean government plan to actively utilize KGTB for international joint research for green ship development. We will strive to share the benefits of green ship technology with the international communities through technical support for developing countries, as well as technological exchanges and joint research with advanced countries such as Europe. For the realization of ocean carbon neutrality, CRISO together with the Korean government and the international community intend to contribute to the international community through the process of technological development and commercialization by using KGTB. After this session, we serve detailed international cooperation plans via IMO information paper. So I wish you your interest and participation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kang. Dr. Hughes, finally, it's your turn. You have a long experience in IMO, so I think we can contribute to this panel discussion very big. So can I ask you to introduce yourself and introduce your view on decarbonization issue? Dr. Hughes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Lim. Thank you for the kind introduction. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, and everyone watching around the world. Yes, indeed. My name is Edmund Hughes. I am now a consultant, but I worked for nearly 10 years at the International Maritime Organization, where I ended up as responsible for the work by the organization on emissions from shipping, not just, primarily MARPOL Annex 6, which includes the emissions, pollution emissions such as sulfur oxides, nitrogen oxides. We mustn't forget those, but also the work on energy efficiency reduction, and also the work to address greenhouse gas emissions from international shipping, including the development and adoption of the initial IMO greenhouse gas strategy in 2018. And prior to joining IMO, I worked for the UK, United Kingdom's Maritime Administration, where I had several policy roles there. So I have a lot of experience of regulation, both at national and international level, but also of understanding implementation issues. And I think that is a real critical aspect of all this discussion. We're still very much at the early days of consideration of proposals, particularly the mid and long-term proposals. Obviously, we have the EEXI and the CII short-term measures, which have all now already been adopted and will be entering into effect by 2023. And so the implementation issues are critical when it comes to international regulation, and we should never forget those, not just the technical aspects of those, but also the legal and the enforcement aspects, because ultimately the whole business of shipping is a global business, and we need to understand how any measures that are developed and adopted, and this was alluded to some degree in the presentations, when we adopt these measures, we have to understand their impacts globally, and we have to not only understand those impacts, we also have to address any concerns by governments, particularly developing countries, and in particular small island developing states and least developed countries, because ultimately what we won't want to do is destroy the global shipping market, which frankly is a very great success story. We must not forget that in the last 50 years we've seen enormous, I know in Korea, and by the way, I apologize, I should have thanked the government of Korea for their kind invitation to participate in this meeting. We've seen enormous development in shipping and its growth, and we now see also, what's going on in the world with the supply chains, the importance of shipping. And so any actions we take as a sector, as regulators, we have to understand those impacts, and it's otherwise, they can have significant consequences to economies, particularly emerging economies. So I think there is a balance here, but at the same time, we also have this imperative to address climate change, and we can see that is a priority, and frankly, shipping has to contribute fully to that work. But I'll leave it there for now, and hopefully we'll pick up on some of this in the panel discussion. And thank you again for the invite to participate, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hughes. Thank you for your kind summary and introduction of yourself. Especially Dr. Hughes and Dr. Bazari is now in UK, so it's very early in the morning there. I really appreciate your participation to panel discussion again. From now on, we are going to have a panel discussion. I'd like to invite each panelist to make 2 questions to other speakers. I think I take order from Dr. Hughes and Dr. Gang and Dr. Bazari. Can I ask Dr. Hughes first? You can make question now.
Oh, thank you. Okay, I'm asking the questions. Okay, I think I'd like to ask Dr. Bazari in particular, which zero carbon fuel does he think will emerge as the most commonly used by international shipping, and why he feels that will be the lead contender really by shipping, or will there be a multi-fuel future? Thank you.
Dr. Bazari?
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Hughes, for that question. Of course, that's a very, very important question for the business and for the shipping, for everybody to be able to answer. At this stage, I think we can speculate more or less, but I will give you my view. Within my presentation, I talked about various pathways, and one of the pathways was that, okay, we go from the sort of renewable to other type of fuels, and from there we use it on board ships. And I think for the future, the direction would be in that, because the way I see it, that biofuels pathway would not give us the amount of fuel that we require. We would be basically fighting with aviation on that front, because it is used by aviation quite a lot. And therefore, we must go for the other option, which is going to be the electrofuel side. So if you look at the electrofuel side, it means that we are going to generate electricity at larger scale. Then we are going to somehow produce hydrogen from electricity. And then we are going to move and use the hydrogen to produce other alternative fuels. So amongst those, I would say maybe the 3 favorites at the present times are methanol, ammonia, and of course, hydrogen itself. Again, on those 3, I could see that the hydrogen may be the last contender because of the issues of storage, safety, etc., and the cost. So I would say maybe for the medium term, and by medium term, we are talking about 2030, 2035, we will be talking about maybe larger scale methanol and ammonia in the industry. And that would depend again on how much we would be successful to produce basically renewable electricity, because we don't want to produce them from non-renewable electricity. So that's really my answer, that in the medium term, at the present time, the guesswork is that we would be moving into a kind of synthetic fuels. And if we are going to go there, there would be 2 technologies important: renewable electricity, and the second one is, of course, carbon capture. Although there is not too much discussion about carbon capture, I still believe that carbon capture is going to be a very important technology of the future in terms of fuels, which we are going to produce.
Thank you. I think the point about the alternative fuels and the need for the energy is a key one, actually, and we know that the energy has to be sustainable, otherwise we're just transferring the problem or the emissions somewhere upstream, and of course that is not going to help us meet the Paris Agreement goals of temperature reduction. In that respect, I think, and this question for Dr. Kang, I mean, Dr. Kang, do you think that nuclear-powered ships, and we don't really talk much about nuclear power, but do you think nuclear-powered ships should be considered to achieve decarbonisation of international shipping, especially with respect to deep-sea, ocean-going ships, you know, the larger power consumers, where we know that is the real significant problem in terms of energy consumption? Thank you.
Thank you for your sensitive question. Personally, I think decarbonization through the use of nuclear-powered ships is technically possible. However, even considering the technological possibilities, it is skeptical that nuclear-powered ships will be considered as a major factor in ocean carbon neutrality. There are also many institutional constraints and technical barriers to the application of nuclear propulsion technology to ships conducting military operations. For example, the use of nuclear fuel enriched above a certain level is subject to strict control and monitoring by the international community such as NPT, IAEA, and some engagement of anyway. Nuclear-powered ships that cannot use highly enriched fuels need to replace nuclear fuel at least once during their life cycle. And in this case, it is very difficult to secure economic feasibility. For this reason, I believe that it is more appropriate for the utilization of nuclear technology to be used in the process of producing carbon neutral fuels that can respond to e-fuels such as e-ammonia proposed by Europe rather than the development of nuclear-powered ships. Although we have not yet discussed the greenhouse gas emissions from the life cycle assessment perspective, it is my personal view that the use of nuclear technology may be necessary considering the equity in Europe and other regions where renewable energy is abundant or not. In addition, I believe that nuclear energy can be used to establish the supply chain of carbon-free fuels, such as ammonia with economic feasibility, which is produced near the equator, where renewable energy is used, then transported by ship, and finally, reforming hydrogen is needed by using nuclear power plant. I can guess such cases. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hughes, and thank you, Dr. Kang. And I think I want to give Dr. Bazari to make a question first. Bazari,
Okay.
you
Yeah,
may have lots of questions.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I would like to ask you the first question, and that is closely related to your presentation, because in your presentation you talked about EEXI and you talked about CII. They are new regulations under IMO, and they are targeting the existing ships, not the new ships as we call it, the existing ships. Now, there are debates that all these regulations, whether they are really cost effective. So my question is to you is about the cost effectiveness of these regulations in terms of how much would it cost for the shipping community to implement EEXI and CII, and how much reduction in CO2 is expected from all of these activities. The reason I'm interested is part of what we call impact assessment. In other words, whether these changes are really useful, whether they give us what we want, or they are cosmetics. So are they essential or are they cosmetic? So I'm just wondering whether you have come across with any studies which tells us some numbers in these areas.
Thank you, Dr. Bazari. Thank you for your tough question. And it's a very good question. I think you are asking CO2 reduction possibility and the total cost of EEXI and CII. As far as I understand it, there has been lots of discussion about EEXI in IMO already. Some party opposed this idea. The opposition party of EEXI insists that it is just by the slow steaming of the vessel, which is already the current trend of existing vessel. They said it does not actually reduce the CO2 emission. But the proponent part of the EEXI explained that EEXI is enough to meet the 2030 short-term target. I mean the 40% carbon intensity reduction by 2030. But the actual impact based on 2019 is just about its carbon intensity 7% This value was mentioned in one of ISWG GHG 7 paper. As I remember, it's a 7-15. In short, the paper mentioned that EXI have an impact to reduce carbon intensity to meet the 2030 target, but actual impact on current operation profile is not that big. The real benefit of EXI is to prevent the ship from speeding up again in the possible future market condition. I think one more meaning of EXI is to give some level playing field between the new ship which is energy efficient and old ship which is not energy efficient. And I want to make sure that, but the impact could be quite different on ship type, size, and operation, route and operation profile. General impact on analysis said that it's not that big, but when it comes to the real ship owner who has an old ship, who has a smaller vessel, they have to face a lot bigger impact, I think. Therefore, shipping company have to check their impact by themselves on their fleet. As you well understand, the EXI does not control the actual emission of vessel. It's a technical measure that changes the technical specification of the vessel, such as engine power limit, etc., etc. EXI cannot control actual emission directly. Therefore, CII rating was introduced, and it has a more impact, I think. If it relates to ship energy efficiency based on the actual annual operation data, in addition, criteria itself will become more stringent, and options I showed in my presentation will be decided in IMO before 2027. I think it will become much more stringent. I think it will do some actual role and have a detrimental impact in the future. For the cost of EXI, I don't think I am the right person to answer, but I want to say that there are two kinds of costs. The first one is the cost for installing the physical measure, such as EPL and energy saving device, etc. The other one is the possible reduction of transport work. I mean, we may need more vessel. I mean, because the ship speed and operation profile limit due to EXI, we have to build a new vessel. It's not the other cost. And cost, I'll meet lots of ship owners about because of EXI and CII. The first response of them is the cost for the EXI, EPL, and etc. is too expensive. So the ship owners, shipping industry have to check the value. The cost is the difference based on how much effective the ship owner want, which kind of option they will take. It's very complicated issue.
Sorry to interrupt, apologies. I just, on the point of the cost, I think we also have to remember there was an impact assessment undertaken by the IMO on the short-term measure. And that impact assessment, I think this is a very important point actually, because and the point you made about transport work is vital, because I think that impact assessment identified the fact that there were significant impacts on some countries because of the short-term measures.
Yes.
And that was due to the transport work element. It was the fact that there was going to be an impact on those states because of the effect it had on the shipping services that were provided to those states, particularly the small island developing states. And I think that is a vital part, and I thank you for raising it, because I think that is really quite critical here. We're still really trying to understand how some of these measures are going to have an impact further down the line, and that is a really difficult thing to do. And it was a massive study it was undertaken, and I think this is why, frankly, this is a very good question and very pertinent. But I apologies for interrupting.
Very good point.
To make that point.
Very good point. And some flag states provided some analysis of impact of EXI and CI on their national economy. I remember it was Brazil. It was released in some IMO meeting. So I think that's my answer to Dr. Bazari.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive answer, and thank you to Dr. Hughes for complementing that. My second question I would like to raise to Mr. Kang. and that is to do with their marine testbed and what he was trying to advocate in his presentation. I remember I was in Republic of Korea maybe about 5 years ago, and I remember that there was discussion about marine testbed, and there was discussion about the standardization and promotion of energy efficient technologies. So my question is to you, that Mr. Kang, that how can this idea of marine testbed support the validation of the claims which are made on CO2 reduction levels by various players in the industry? And do you see that there is a need for IMO to put in some standards or regulations to mandate this kind of verifications, or not? That's the question, basically.
Thank you for your question, Dr. Bajari. As we were aware, the calculation formulas for EDI and EXI are for ships, not for unit parts. And as I presented before this session, KGTB, the marine testbed, is not mandatory facilities for green ship technology development, but for many companies, enterprises, and institutions, marine demonstration procedure and how to secure track record to commercialize the technology is very hot and urgent issue. For this reason, we suggested this concept of marine testbed, and it's really different from Europe and other advanced countries. There are many small and startups which, for them, marine demonstration process and building cost to testbed ship is quite a huge burden. So we plan this project to support them to develop some specific green ship technology with a reasonable cost and period. But in case of KGTB, we hopefully we use this ship as a platform for international cooperation and make some standard to share the result of that R&D process. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bajari, and thank you, Dr. Kang. Finally, Dr. Kang, it's your turn, but we are running out of time, so
yeah,
you have a chance for only one question. So
I see. Then I would like to ask to Dr. Bajari, what do you think about the plan to secure economic feasibility to realize carbon neutrality? Can the E- fuel model specialized in some regions, such as Europe, become a global carbon neutral fuel model from the LCA point of view?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. The way I understood is that the question is about the supply of alternative fuels, future fuels, and whether it would be supplied maybe centrally, similar to what we have got now, for example, in terms of fossil fuels, that some of the countries are the main suppliers. We don't know how the market would develop. The main question, as I mentioned within my presentation, is which fuel would win the game. If, assuming that we are going to have methanol and ammonia at larger scale, and for producing those methanol and ammonia, we would need electricity, of course. And then the electricity would be generated centrally by certain government, let's say by going into nuclear power rather than renewable electricity. Eventually we found that, okay, we need to go to nuclear power. Then, of course, that would open the way for those countries who are able to produce electricity or zero carbon electricity to produce fuel in a mass market. So that is one scenario, of course. The other scenario is more distributed, systems of renewable energy from, let's say, solar panels and solar systems. And that renewable energy could be produced by a variety of countries and a smaller scale production of various systems. And for the second scenario, we would need really the development of a smaller scale technologies for energy production and other alternative fuel production. We will see how it would evolve, but those are the two pathways that I could see is possible. Yes, your view could happen. It depends on countries and on the models they choose to produce fuels. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kang, and thank you, Dr. Bajari. I'm sorry to say that we are running out of time. GHG and decarbonization issue is enormous subject. I want to discuss this issue all day, but we just have 8 minutes. But I think it's better to give time to all panelists to make a final statement. You could say it when you add to when you speak today or today. So I'll take the same order as we did before the Q&A session. Dr. Hughes, you are the first.
Thank you very much. And indeed, it's a massive subject and raises so many questions, and we could talk all day. I think for me, and I just pick it up on that last question actually about the alternative fuels. I think verification and certification of those alternative fuels is going to become a critical issue, frankly, because the life cycle assessment of those fuels is now going to be taken into account. I can only see that. So the upstream emissions that are generated from those developing those fuels will be taken into account. That will need to be verified and certified globally, because there's no point just one region or one country saying we want these fuels and then they've been supplied elsewhere and there's no certification or verification that those are meeting the climate goals. The other point I'd like to make is about, we obviously have next week, we have COP26 starting here in the United Kingdom. That is again, the first time, obviously, because of the pandemic, and we almost recognise the impact the pandemic is still having on the global society. But it's the first time the COP has met in person since 2019, and it is again, it reinforces. And we had the UNEP report yesterday, the gap emissions report, which talks about us, even with the promises that have been degree temperature rise. Frankly, you know, that is not going to be good enough. So there is increased pressure on everyone to act, including the shipping industry. We saw that last week at the IMO with the intersessional meeting, where the market-based measures proposals have been now started to discuss those. People might say, oh, we've talked about them long enough, but the key difference now, ladies and gentlemen, is that we now have a target. We now have a clear target. The target currently is a 50% reduction, of at least 50% reduction by 2050. However, I would suggest again that because of the pressure globally and by all the governments signing up to net zero, that we will see a net zero target on international shipping placed in by 2050. I really believe when we see the revision of the strategy, that will be the case, because governments understand that we have to push this, push the sector harder and faster now to achieve net zero emissions in the sector. Thank you very much, and thank you again. I wish we could speak longer. Thank you again for the opportunity to be with you today. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Dr. Bajari, it's your turn.
Yes, I would like to go back to our presentations. I think you made a presentation on more or less operational measures, as we call it, EXI or CII. Dr. Kang made the presentation on technology side and energy efficiency and technology, and myself made a presentation on fuels. And these are the three areas that we need to work on up to 2050, I would say, at least, and maybe beyond that, to make the shipping decarbonization happen. On the fuel side, of course, the transition would be a little bit painful, I would say, and for painful in terms of, okay, what would be the alternative? There would be a lot of trial and errors, and then there would be the issue of cost and other aspects. The same would happen, I think, for the shipping technology and for shipping operation. Cost would be always at the forefront for people to see that how can we make this transition in an optimal, cost-effective way? So that would be the main question that would be there. I would say that when we look at the future, there is plenty of work to be done. So for younger generations who are listening to us, there is a lot of work to be done, a lot of innovation that needs to be done. So I would encourage everybody to get on board and do some work, further work in this area. And I think IMO has given us the right direction with its strategy, with its current activity, but we must make sure that the move for the future is cost effective, is innovative, and everybody is on board. It is inclusive for everybody, and that's my final word. And I'm really thanking you and Republic of Korea for inviting me to be part of this important event. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bajari. Dr. Kang, it's your turn.
It's my time. Thank you very much for this chance. And to realize ocean carbon neutrality, I think we have to overcome some barriers of costly period, and global cooperation for global standardization is very important. For this, CRISO will serve marine test bed, so-called KGTB, in few years. I wish you your interest and participation. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, Dr. Kang. It's time to wrap up. I mean, GHG and decarbonization is an enormous subject to deal with just 1 or 2 hours. But today's presentations are composed very well. I myself covered the short-term measures of IMO GHG strategy, what shipping industry have to do right now and coming years, mainly about EXI and CII. Dr. Bajari dealt with a wide range of this issue, from regulation, future fuel, finance, and international cooperation. I think he touched almost every aspect of GHG issue. Dr. Kang introduced the future technical development concept and the Green Ships K project, especially the plan for the testbed vessel was very interesting. Our special panelist, Dr. Hughes, shared his insight about decarbonization issue. He touched some balance between the implementation and the legal aspect. I think it's very helpful. It gives us the lots of insight. And Q&A session was also, I think, very helpful and insightful. UNFCCC COP26 will be held in the end of this month, where the leaders will get together to discuss climate change issue. It's expected that the more ambitious target will be discussed there. Of course, this have the direct or indirect influence on the maritime industry. All other industries and shareholders are moving toward decarbonization in line with Paris Agreement. Maritime sector is also subject to this global trend and movement. We need cooperation and action for decarbonization. I hope all participants and viewers of this session could be well prepared for this big change and contribute to solve this global issue. I appreciate Dr. Bajari, Dr. Kang, and Dr. Hughes again. Thank you, all viewers and secretariat. Thank you again. Back to the organizer.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.